communicate about it? What do we do that works against it? And trying to align policies, programs, budgets to make that a priority and embed it in the different things that we do. So today I'm gonna let's see if I can put them over here. Maybe not. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of background, just top level about why this is important, how it's come to the place that we're at now and the moment that we're trying to meet. A little bit of background about how thinking about transportation safety has evolved over the last 10 years or so, what ITE is currently doing about it. There will be a pitch and a plug to for everybody to get more involved. And then I'll talk specifically about our issues within the city of Santa Rosa, and then we're going to address those. Thanks. So the chart on the screen shows transportation-related fatalities on the roadway network over the last 100 years, give or take. And there are ebbs and flows to this, especially as we continue to grow as a country, both population-wise and geographically. A lot of that growth has been done through sprawl and outward. That's created a number of issues, even with increased focus on transportation safety and technological advances that help that in terms of vehicles themselves and other protection, secondary software items that help that. But about in the last 10 years or so, we've seen no progress in the area in terms of results. And I will not expose results, but I picked that date specifically because that's when Vision Zero policies and programs that were initially created in Europe were first brought over to some of the bigger cities in the United States. Despite that, we've seen fatalities continue to increase by those levels. Next, please. Why that is been a matter of debate, though I think that we're getting closer and closer to at least those who are involved in the data science aspect of this doing a better job of understanding why that is. And I think this slide, and I should credit Megan, I'm doing about 4 slides here that are stolen directly from a presentation she gave in January. Despite those increases and despite the number of fatalities in the last few years, increasing, a significant portion of those are pedestrian fatalities. Next slide, please. We're doing an increasingly better job of keeping people safe inside of vehicles, especially inside of newer vehicles, almost without question at the expense of people outside of vehicles. So older vehicles, people who are not protected by a multi-thousand-pound metal box, are paying the price for the increased size, mass, and speed of newer vehicles. Next slide, please. The researchers at the CDC about 15 years ago created a health impact pyramid to describe how diseases are attempted to be controlled, eradicated, managed as best we can. And they describe it through this pyramid with a identification that we spend a lot of time at the top of the pyramid. Talking about individual actions that require change in behavior, different decisions to be made by individuals to avoid those diseases. We spend a lot less time focused on bottom of the pyramid, the base factors as to why those things happen, socioeconomic factors, any kind of longer preventive actions that could be made, more proactive approach. And what they found is that, when you're talking about the bottom of the pyramid, you decrease the amount of individual effort that you need for an intervention for any particular person. And as a result, you are able to impact the greater population. So this is, again, started at the CDC. It's kind of permeated throughout health sciences and now part of the lexicon of medical science and discussing how to control and eradicate diseases. Similarly, through a research effort partially led by the CDC, that was translated towards transportation safety. And similar pyramid, similar structure, but what you see here is, the traditional ease of transportation safety, of vision zero approaches, and focus a lot on this top three, maybe even the fourth one, but we very rarely get into the socioeconomic factors that lead to transportation safety issues. So, at the top, we're talking about education programs, trying to get out to driver education to those who have shown behavioral issues in terms of operating vehicles or on the transportation network. And here we're talking about safety measures that mostly reflect the engineering aspects of things, either active to try to control behavior or those things that are latent that are just built into vehicles and the way that we design roads that change that, including the timing control of traffic signals of other traffic control devices. When we get that here to the built environment, we're talking about bigger changes in terms of traffic control, roadway design, not just in terms of spot improvements, but kind of bigger aspects that more dictate traveler behavior, driver behavior. But at the bottom, what we don't talk about a lot is things that lead to those issues. How far are we making people travel? What's leading to their exposure to these types of incidents? Why are we not, as transportation professionals, speaking up about the safety aspects of the impacts of land use decisions? It's directly leading to a number of issues, exposure to transportation safety. That leads to the next slide. So when we talk about risk that people are at,
you can give me the carrot because I put it down carelessly.
Okay.
All right, so when we talk about the risk that people are at, there are really three factors that relate to what that amount of risk is. So again, that exposure, how far are we making people travel? On what modes are we making people travel? I'm going to highlight a specific statistic to Santa Rosa. Our last 13 pedestrian fatalities, 7 of them have been on house people. They're 24-hour pedestrians. Street all the time. It's not a coincidence. Their exposure is way higher than most other teams. Then we know the frequency or the likelihood. So what are the chances that any particular interaction, any particular location might lead to a collision? That gets back to the design of that location. How are we protecting people? How are we separating them in both time and space to give them an opportunity to pass through an area safely? And then the severity. An interesting comment was made at the Transportation Research Board meeting last month, where a former NHTSA employee summarized it, and he just said speed kills. We're going to transition to talk a little bit about kinetic energy in a moment, but when we let the speed be dictated by the design of a facility is dictate the speed of the road, right? It indicates to drivers even passively. I talked about that with our city leadership, about our city council, and they come back with anecdotes of, yeah, I know the speed limit is 35, and I look down and I'm going 43, and I didn't even know it, right? It's that kind of passive indication about what speed should be that leads to increased severity, even when people are trying to be aware of it, and it creates that additional vulnerability in collision. So thinking about, I created this slide for, this is part of an amalgamation of a couple of presentations that I gave to our city council in the last few months, but trying to communicate to them that kinetic energy transfer likelihood, that risk, we're trying to decrease that in any way we can. What that means is that, again, where that occurs in space on our streets, speed at which it occurs, but also there are a number of things that we can't control that are becoming challenges and risks that we as a city can't avoid. Amongst them are that vehicles are getting bigger. They're heavier, they're taller, and that risk is being transferred. I think that's part of why we see some of those statistics at the beginning. The increases, the safety improvements that we're making are being eaten up by vehicle size. So we've got to find a way to avoid this and bring the tolerance and the risk of those kinetic energy transfers down to a level where we're not seeing if that energy transfer likelihood as frequent or that severity as severe. And this is not a linear relationship too. So there is an area where those speeds and those masses get to a point that the significance of those crashes becomes much more severe, and we translate from potential injury to serious injury to fatality here. Next slide, please. What are we doing about it? We, as a profession, as an industry, are increasingly transferring from a ease approach, a pick and choose approach to a safe systems approach. What you see here is a safe systems wheel. It essentially says, in order to increase transportation safety, there are a number of things that can be done, but they are not done in isolation, and all of them should be done. So we're talking about improving the safety of vehicles. We're talking about safer speeds, safer road design, safer road users, and what happens after crashes occur, post-grounding error. This is intended to be a proactive approach. It's intended to be a shared approach, and it acknowledges that humans make mistakes and that they shouldn't die as a result of them. And I think that's the important part, is that we're not going to eradicate this by trying to fix individual behavior. This needs to be done systemically and be embedded in everything that we're doing. Next slide, please. I really like this graphic that, again, built from Megan, that shows the idea of creating redundancies in your system to try to mitigate crashes. If you think about it as layers of Swiss cheese, at any one point, one of those layers of Swiss cheese has an opportunity to stop a crash. Okay? It could be safer vehicles, it could be safer speeds, it could be better, safer road users. It could even be the post-crash care and improving, decreasing the severity of a crash or outcomes for individuals who unfortunately have been in. So what happens is that you only get to severe injury and fatality when all of those areas fail. You've got to find that slice where you're able to shoot your 5 different slices of Swiss cheese. We want to create as many opportunities to stop a crash as possible before it occurs. Next slide, please. Transitioning to the safety roadmap that was released by ITE in January, it has a number of areas. It's only about a 30 or 40 page document. It lays out goal areas for really targeting its membership and how ITE is evolving to create new resources and advocate in terms of transportation safety. And then at the end, there is a long list of action items, nearly 40, I think, that are assigned to different councils, committees, leadership areas within ITE. We go to the next slide, please. As an example, I'm highlighting one for the Transportation Planning Council that creates an opportunity to review how ITE's resources related to land use planning and transportation engineering and transportation planning, and what they say and don't say about transportation safety. So it's almost like a ombudsman effort at first to go through them and see where do our resources lack in terms of safety, where do we contradict ourselves even in terms of advocating and promoting the inclusion of transportation safety elements throughout. So this is one of the Transportation Council's action items for this year. This is the time where I get to make that pitch. Every council, every committee at the national level is looking for volunteers. There is no barrier to entry. If you have an hour a month, if you've got an hour a year that you can offer to somebody, every council will pay you as a volunteer. So please consider that, reach out, use the resources that are available to find who the leaders of those councils and committees are and find a way to participate. If there's something that interests you, safety plan related or not, everybody's looking for. We're all volunteers too. With given as much time as we have and have interest for, both can always use one. Next slide, please. All right, so how does this translate to Santa Rosa? In 2019, we kicked off a Vision Zero action plan with the rest of the county that was led by Sonoma County Transportation Authority and our Department of Health, the Department of Health. Shortly after this kicked off, COVID occurred, and priorities changed for the Department of Health, and they became more of a secondary partner than a leader in this. What it did though was give us a document by which to say to all of our city leaders and all of our elected officials, say, is this important to you? And put them on the record. We go to the next slide, please. The other important aspect of this is that it did a great job of synthesizing data. Now, the data that it synthesizes is all looking back. Right? It's all crashes that have occurred, severe injuries, fatal crashes. And so it does a great job of telling us where things happen. It doesn't do a great job of telling us where things might happen, particularly forward looking, but it does give us a starting point to go with it. The other thing it did was identify a positive crashes per the collision reports filed with CHP. Those first three are all about speed and time to space. So again, we've got people trying to use the same time. And we've got them doing so at more than 60% of our injury and fatal crashes at those three as a factor. We also have a significant wine tourism industry in Sonoma County. For a long time, that has been identified as an area of concern with respect to roadway safety. It still is. Frankly, I don't have a good answer for that. Other than to try to control the things that we can control. There are more educational efforts occurring with some of the wineries, but again, that's a very secondary individual behavior type of approach that is only going to be so effective. The other aspect that it showed folks was who's being affected by these crashes. So our commute mode split in the county is almost 93% of the automobiles. Those severe injuries or the crashes, only 82% of those injured in crashes are inside of the vehicle. When we look at the fatal and severe injuries, though, almost 45% are those outside of the vehicle. So we know the impacts of these crashes through there. Without question, one of the other aspects of this in looking at geographic distribution of zip codes is that it affects our vulnerable community members in terms of income, in terms of race, in terms of sex. It is not straight white rich men who are being affected by this, proportional to everybody else. Every way you can slice demographics, it's women, minorities, low income people who have been impacted by this and now have some type of trauma, often generational, often spreading throughout their family and their community as a result of these crashes. As part of the Vision Zero Action Plan, we established a high injury network. Again, looking back on the crashes that have already occurred, you can see from the map of the county that the high injury network is focused in two areas, really. It's population centers and it's state highways. It's those rural arterials that are part of the identifying where the crashes have occurred. But to move into the city of Santa Rosa, if I gave you a Google map and asked you to draw on it, which roads you would think might be the high injury roads, you would get 80% of it right. It's the high-speed arterials. We have two Caltrans facilities running through the center of the city. One is Highway 101 on the south. The other is State Route 12, both east and west. Here it's a separated facility between the local street for this little jog, and then becomes the local highway on the east side of the city. But those two facilities create a lot of separation, of huge gaps between the city that force a lot of people to use the facilities. Or so concentrating on a few certain facilities around in areas that lead to increased conflict as a result of frequency of use for people traveling through the city. Next slide, please. We overlay that too on top of our equity priority communities. As defined by EPC, you see that the vast majority of our high injury network is located in those communities. We have 515 road miles in the city. 48 of them are on our high injury network. So almost 9% of our roadway network is a high injury network. But almost 30% of that is located within equity priority. So pretty clearly disproportionate as an almost 3-to-1 ratio. When we think about that too, what was pretty shocking through the data is that amongst places in Sonoma County, Santa Rosa is without question the safest place. We are a city of a little over 180,000 people. Over the last 12 years, we've had between 1 and 10 fatalities on local roads a year. Our rate is about 1/10 of the world's rate. It's about 1/3 of the country's rate. It's about half of California's rate. But it's disproportionately affecting people who were systemically creating increased exposure through socioeconomic factors. We have a clear link between transportation and housing costs, and as you decrease one, you increase the other. That link also showed that you're now creating exposure by increased housing prices. We'll talk a little bit about this, about our department's approach to land use issues coming up, but I want to show this because these are not separate issues, they're linked. And it's frequently not a decision about transportation safety and exposure, it's about where can I afford to live? How do I make do to provide for my family, give them a place to live, figure out how we're going to be and exist where we're trying to live. The Vision Zero Action Plan for the county had 6 goal areas. I've highlighted 4 there that are really in control, or there's a ability for local jurisdictions to have more control over those goals and actions. Go to the next slide. We took that Vision Zero Action Plan and created one specific to the city that listed 47 different action items. It's too many, and a lot of them focus on those individual behaviors and efforts. But there are quite a bit in terms of roadway design and even our own street standards and how we systemically approach transportation safety and how we're not doing it. If you move to the next slide. Again, I mentioned the crash statistics a little while ago. I'm sharing here from the last 12 years a slide showing our fatal and severe injury crashes. I shared this because our fatal crash number, just as a number, is so low. It leads to some funky statistics and odd communicating. For instance, last year we had, 2023, we had 2 fatalities. In 2024, we had 6. And the police department chose to communicate that as a 200% increase in fatalities. It's strictly true. If you were making decisions based on that, that would be a stark, and I don't mean to minimize those 6 people who lost their lives last year, but that's not really telling the full story. We're looking at this, especially in terms of the risks. Are we bringing the combination of fatal and severe injury crashes down? Are we managing those? We had peaks in 2018, 2019 area, but we've been steadily bringing those down since. At the bottom, you see our the subset of those crashes that involved a pedestrian or bicyclist, and it's about a third of our fatal and severe injury crashes. If you combine those together, so again, vulnerable road users in vulnerable communities are the ones bearing the brunt of this. for the purposes of our city council, I translated this into a cost. There's been a lot of research done on what the comprehensive cost of crashes are in terms of not just the medical bills and the vehicle repairs, but also the uh, quality of life losses. You can even do things as silly as the traffic delay caused by crashes. When we see those crashes over the last 10 years across the city and its residents and the folks involved in it, more than 1.5 billion. It's an astronomical amount that we have some say in trying to mitigate. And I think putting it in these terms show the city council that this is a worthwhile effort to spend so much energy and money on, frankly, to try to improve our transportation network. Last March, woman was crossing the street a little after 6 in the morning. Driver of a vehicle hit her. She was in the fourth lane of a 4-lane roadway, unprotected roadway crossing, had a rectangular flashing beacon that was lit. These were the news articles the following days. I want to highlight specifically that all of them use very passive language. Woman was hit by a truck. Driver of the vehicle strikes the vehicle. The framing that we have indicates that I think we as a community, we as trying to set the culture of safety, need to do a better job of communicating this. I reached out to a couple of our publications afterwards and asked them to reconsider their framing, their phrasing, their word choice around this. We've seen some action in that, but work to be done. But I think this is the way that it occurs to a lot of people, is that people die on roads. That's what happens, right? There's nothing we can do about it. We have to get rid of this kind of framing. Go to the next slide. One of the articles written by a local law firm will post about injury crashes after they happen. One of the things that they pulled right after was that Santa Rosa police ruled out speed as a factor. That's obviously bullshit. If the vehicle was going a different, lower speed, there's a different result to this. What that number is, we don't know exactly, but we know the speed was a factor. So pretending that the person going the speed limit, going a speed that police would not ticket them, that doesn't mean the speed was not a factor in crash. Again, got to reframe that and communicate to people that words have meaning and they matter in terms of why these crashes are having the results that they're having. When I joined the city, I asked for our capital improvement program, and was surprised to find out that we program the capital funds that are available to us annually. It makes it really hard to do anything long term, to understand what our ability to implement changes. And our buying power goes down every year. I've been buying documents back 8 years, where we received just over $20 million for capital improvement projects. If we just carry that through with inflation over the last 8 years, that number will be more than 35. Last year it was just over 18. It ebbs and flows based on development fees, based on things. It's some of our county contribution through the transportation authority. But we didn't have a plan, and we were losing the ability to make change over time just as a result of the buying power of that funding. So when I learned that we didn't have one, what I did was start going through our technical documents, so all of our planning documents, everything that's identified as a need. Stopped counting when I got to $1 billion. Of that 18 million that we had last year, only 4 million of it went to the $1 billion worth of improvements identified in those planning documents. So we're never going to make a dent in this. So the first thing that we did, we removed city facilities. We don't really have a funding source for that in terms of our capital improvement funds. That's a city council issue, a city management issue that we'll have to deal with. But the next thing we did was new roadways and road widening projects are out. They're just gone. They're inefficient. They do not address the safety issue that our city council has now adopted a policy and affirmed that policy. When I arrived, we had just finishing a roadway widening project that we'll talk about in just a moment. That increased capacity, increased speeds immediately adjacent to a high school on the very edge of town. Struggle to see how that makes sense with our stated goals of being stewards of climate, improving transportation safety, improving multimodal transportation. I was able to point to a half dozen different city council goals that was. Also adds to our maintenance burden. In mid-year this year, we reduced our budget as a result of lower revenues. We're going to do so again next year. I'm almost certainly going to lose street maintenance staff and those capital improvement dollars that we take care of the pavement are not going as far as they used to. And I'm not optimistic that any more help is coming. So we've got to be more responsible and more thoughtful about how we do this. We also so just by doing that, we've reduced it down to a quarter of what it was originally. But this number did include our ongoing maintenance. We have a pavement maintenance plan that includes a goal of meeting MTC standards. We know that we need to invest about $25 million a year to get back to those standards. We need to invest just under $20 million a year, not to fall any farther behind. And that budget is only 20. So all we did was repave streets. We still wouldn't get there. Luckily, shortly after I joined the city, the council went through a goal setting process that established these 7 areas as council goals. And so we were asked at the same time to do a capital improvement program prioritization process. And rather than reinventing the wheel, we stuck specifically to the goals the council just set. So achieving and maintaining fiscal sustainability, which means no new infrastructure that we cannot take care of. Investing in the development of the city infrastructure. So what is it? Who are we serving with that? Can we maintain it? Addressing climate change, fostering safe, healthy areas. These are easy things to point to in terms of how do we reprioritize our capital improvements, what that does. When I specifically brought those goals to council for their feedback, I gave them a short presentation and then an open-ended question. Tell me what your priorities are with respect to transportation, and see here what they suggested in their comments. We've had a big challenge actually getting things done. So that's a huge focus. We have the money sitting forever because there's not a full plan on how to deliver these things. The mayor at the time went last, and she summarized her comments by saying, focus on children. Things that will serve schools, parks, keep kids safe. That's where the focus should be. And I thought they did a really good job of thinking about things like safety, climate, equity, walkability, bikeability, resiliency. It's like you can catch all of those things within how we plan for the future, for the next generation of Santa Rosans, where they're at now and where they want to be 10, 15 years from now. So we went back and looked at the spending, how it had been done over the last 5 years. In total, just over $108 million. $34.5 million for pavement maintenance. Only about $10 million to safety projects, pedestrian intersections, bike facilities. What you see here, $44 million to what we call past promises. If you go to the next slide, one more. We spent 40% of our CIP budget in the last 5 years on 3 projects. $12 million to rebuild an interchange, $14 million to build a bicycle pedestrian overcrossing, $17 million for the road widening project that I mentioned earlier. Next one. Showing those, here are the locations of those. Here's an interchange that's currently being rebuilt. Great project, honestly, like a horrific interchange in an area where our most vulnerable community is segregated from our commercial center. It had a 4-foot sidewalk on one side of the interchange and nothing else. 2 lanes over. Right? The bridge decks for the new interchange were just placed last night. But in total, that's a $47 million project that was just way, way, way outside our needs. It took 21 years from concept to where we will be later this year when we deliver the project. Here's a road widening project. This is the border of Santa Rosa. This road widening partially solved a minor bit of PM peak hour congestion at this intersection. And to do so, we widened 1 mile of road. When I asked about, when people were trying to sell me on that project, as they said, we've included a 6-foot bike lane on the road. It's a 5-lane arterial with a speed limit of 40 miles an hour. It's a bike lane that I see people using. It scares me every time I see it.
No buffer?
No buffer. 12-foot lanes, 6-foot bike lane. Pioneer High School is right here. More than 1,000 students. On the west side, northwest, one of the biggest community parks in the city. The last one here is a pedestrian bicycle overcrossing. It'll connect the junior college to one of our other major commercial centers here at Cottington Mall. Great project in isolation. $46 million. We're on year 23 trying to get that done. We are 2 approvals from Caltrans and PG&E away from releasing that to bid. But we're doing that because we were unwilling to make 2 interchanges safer for people. It's separated by a little more than a mile. These are car-focused areas. They have wide sidewalks that have 4- and 5-foot bike lanes underneath them. At the interchanges, this one is 7 lanes, this one is 8. People don't want to walk around, so our solution was to build a $47 million bridge across the street. Expensive solutions, far outside our means, adding to our maintenance burden. Again, in isolation, great project. If you added a 0 to our capital improvement project, sign me up for most of those right away. But if you're thinking about the problems that we have right now and the way that we can more efficiently, more effectively make improvements for our community members, there's better ways to spend those funds. Things like this. Okay, so thinking about how we reorganize this just by moving away from those past promises. We can invest more in basically everything else by just moving away from those big ticket infrastructure projects. Committing more to pavement maintenance, committing more to specific safety projects or pedestrians, intersection corridors, and bicycles. When we originally started this process, we had a separate category for safety projects, and then some colleagues kind of awoke me to the idea that by calling that out as a separate category, you're making those projects compete with other teams. And instead, safety should be embedded in everything that we're doing. So we took that money away, we gave it back to the sidewalks, intersections, lights, and said, we're not going to move any of those projects forward that aren't safety focused. So that they don't need to be separated out, they need to be part of those individual programs. The other aspect of this that we changed was that what happened in the past was that every individual engineer submitted to the finance team their requests for funding for the next year. And when I say the engineers, that's our capital projects delivery. So they would understand what was on their queue, what they needed to deliver the projects, and they would make their requests. The finance team would match our funding sources to those requests. What's eligible? How much do we have? At no point was transportation planning, traffic engineering team, director of transportation and public works involved in that process. other than to sign off on it at the end. Now all of this money goes to the transportation planning and traffic engineering teams. They're the ones who decide where it goes. If the capital projects team tells them that it's more expensive than they have money for, they have control to shut down projects. What it also does is empower them to go directly to our streets maintenance division and sit and ask them if they can do projects. It encourages them to do smaller scale projects and keep those funds as flexible as they can through the year, instead of assigning them on day one of the fiscal year to a capital project. They now have these buckets that they can refer to throughout the year. I know, for instance, the intersection of corridors, our associate traffic engineer, he's got a plan for how he's going to spend his money the next 5 years. He's got a little bit of contingency in there, but he's responsible for his own contingency. There's no safety net at the bottom of that. He's got to take decisions or work with other people. I know our senior transportation planner and her sidewalk money has a short-term plan side, but she's keeping it flexible while she works through the remainder of our ongoing transportation plan, figure out where she can get the best bang for her buck, and meet significant needs in the short term. And she's also working on trying to figure out if there are alternate delivery methods where we can engage contractors in a different way rather than going through detailed design plans and spelling it out for them. Say, we need a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk here. Here's a pile of money, please build it. So we're trying to be more creative. Really, the big thing is we're going to close out a couple of projects that we promised in the past. We're done with that, and we can kind of wipe the slate clean this coming July 1st, close those things out, and move forward with doing this programmatically, requiring that everybody who's in charge of one of these buckets looks 5 years into the future. What I've encouraged them to do is know that your year one funding is essentially locked in. Your year two, you should be pretty confident about what you're going to do. Years 3, 4, and 5, things are going to change, right? But you need to have a plan in terms so that you can see clearly why your years 1 and 2 spending makes sense. And really, the other thing that this does is ensure that we don't get into a process where we've got 25-year projects on our capital improvements. With this too, we were also able to develop a pavement maintenance plan that will allow us to take a look at road safety in every one of these locations. Every pavement maintenance project is a safety project. We frequently use this to better our transportation plan. We're able to use this to look at every intersection. Every roadway will be restriped, so we can change dimensions, we can change lane layouts, we can change intersection treatments at this time. But now we know in the next 5 years, so now those folks who have the pedestrian, the bicycle, the intersection, the corridor money know when something is happening. They might be able to do something for half the cost, a third of the cost, that if they try to do it by themselves, if they wait till year 2 or year 3 when the pavement project is happening, they're able to provide a little bit of money to get the pavement at those locations. We have 10 divisions within our department. That's still the organizational structure. There are 4 of them on here that really have a light tie to transportation city. So our zero waste, we essentially manage our contract with ecology through one person. We have a real estate team that helps acquire property when we need it, easements, and also surplus of city property. We have a facilities maintenance crew, and materials lab does checks on our pavement projects to make sure that contractors are meeting our requirements. These other 6 divisions, though, all have a part to play in improving transportation safety, and we've reoriented all 6 of them to do so. She'll go to the next slide, Matt. I put the pyramid back on here for each of these slides. Just as a reminder of kind of where we've been able to see opportunities for each of these different divisions. So one of the divisions is our fleet. So that division of 26 maintenance workers maintains more than 1,200 pieces of equipment. They're also responsible for the vehicle replacement program. So they're responding to users' requests and needs, but also our available funding. So we are looking at the vehicles in terms of the number of vehicles that everybody has and whether or not they need them in order to be more cost effective. We're also looking at type of vehicles that they have. We have mandates to electrify our fleet. We know that that makes that limits some of our choices somewhat. But we also have a lot of office workers requesting F-150s. We have a lot of vehicles that are way too big for their actual purpose. So we're, as those come up for replacement, we're asking now each of the individual departments, what do you use this for? We have data in every vehicle about how it's used, how frequently, how far it goes. So we can also provide that input. Ultimately, the responsibility for the purchase of vehicles lies with the city manager. So it's not the individual departments making the decision, it's us providing input to the city manager for those approvals for any vehicle purchases. Also through our maintenance program. So we have requirements that vehicles are serviced every 6 months, if not sooner, based on their usage. When those vehicles are coming in now, we are looking to make changes. We're increasingly putting side guards on vehicles. We are constantly we've changed the standard a little bit for what's acceptable in terms of putting a vehicle out when those dashboard lights come on. Our electrical division maintains our streetlights and traffic signals and other control devices. As part of that, they are in direct control of all 230 of the city's traffic signals. More than 80% of those can be controlled remotely. So we put in leading pedestrian intervals and all red times in every signal that was able to be done. No questions asked. That was just kind of automatic. We're going to do this and see what the results are. There are a couple of corridors where we got phone calls about traffic signal timing doesn't seem right. One of the benefits of City of Santa Rosa is that we don't have a traffic problem. We have a couple of intersections during the peak periods that you get stuck at. You go past the wrong school at the wrong time. You'll see some delay. We don't have a real traffic problem. So we're able to do this. That's what I say. That we can mess things up and then fix them later without having to be too worried about what having those two Caltrans facilities, we have a lot of pass-through traffic through the city, and we have a lot of collection of vehicles that that we're aware of, knowing that we might get calls from county supervisors or even Caltrans, but everything else is within our jurisdiction. We've reoriented our streets team.
Is that right? Here?
Come back, please. We've reoriented our streets team. These are the 8 teams that we have and the functions that they serve. We also do some lights. In addition to potholes, we do some light pavement work on streets that would otherwise not be part of a pavement maintenance by minor streets that the crews can handle themselves. We've instructed them now to, before they restripe anything, to make sure that you're not just putting it back the same way. Go to your transportation planning and traffic engineering team. They get their input on how it should be put back, if there's need for bollards, delineators, any other efficient traffic control. We have put more money and time towards our pavement markings. We have a significant number of faded, worn out pavement markings in the city that lead to especially side swipe type crashes. Some of our multi-lane facilities. And then we've just reinstituted a special projects crew by stealing a person or two from some of those different teams that now is the opportunity for this group to have reimbursable work. It honestly was created in an effort to decrease the burden on our general fund, use capital improvement funds to do this, but it now gives the people in charge of those buckets, team of people here in the city who are looking for chargeable work to do. And so they're not responsible for those small scale capital improvements, additional sidewalk work, pedestrian treatments, intersection treatments. Our capital projects team, biggest projects that they do for us, we do those large scale pavement maintenance projects they put together. Most of that work is about utility coordination, traffic control, getting quantities right so that we get good bids on what those projects are. Those folks are mostly traditional civil engineers, without a background in traffic engineering or transportation planning, much less with a specific eye towards transportation safety. So what we've done there, to go to the next slide, is we started working on changing our street standards, and planning and economic development controls those and told me that it would be an 18-month process to embed those into our. So we're doing that. But in the interim, they have this informal drawing that I made to tell them what safe dimensions look like at intersections. And it said, start with this and then make traffic engineers and transportation planners review it. So an unofficial street standard that took 40 minutes to draw up and now is embedded in all of our pavement. The last two, I haven't talked a lot about transit yet. One of the most exciting things about the position was that our transit service is owned and operated by the city, and it's embedded within our department. It's great opportunity to have that kind of coordination and collaboration. It's very frustrating to try to understand how a transit service is funded, what the limits on that funding are, how they need to plan for uncertainty both in their capital appropriations and their operating budget. We have, through this coordination effort, we created a separate capital improvement fund for the transit planners to make transit improvements, whether that's stops and shelters or whether that's new sidewalks and crossings that are important for them to connect. But they also have a pot of money that they're able to either individually create projects or contribute to some of these other bigger projects without having to lead on their hands and knees to please include those improvements. So now they have a set of funding to contribute to that. I mentioned earlier land use review. So you see it in both these categories here. One of the things that we changed was we looked at our impact analysis guidelines. So all the ways that those conflicted with transportation safety as a priority. It was pretty good. I'll be honest. Like if you just picked a random set of TIA guidelines, you might expect worse. There were a couple of things that needed improvements. One of the other things, though, that we started including a specific section for transportation safety. And one of the statements that we put in there, just as a form statement, is that development in the city of Santa Rosa is likely better for transportation safety than development in any other city in Sonoma County or in unincorporated county. It gives us the opportunity. We have the highest transit mode share, so it gives people the opportunity to not be exposed to the same dangers as everybody else. But that development is almost certainly making that development is going to happen somewhere. It should happen in the city of Santa Rosa through the lens of transportation safety. So we started including that and almost becoming a advocate on the city's behalf with respect to transportation safety for development to occur within the city. So that's coming from both the transit side of things and advocating for their ridership, and the Vision Zero team side of things and advocating for transportation safety. I've said throughout this, I've used the terms our transportation planners and our traffic engineers. They were in separate silos before. Now they're in one. We've rebranded it as the Vision Zero team. So this team sets speed limits, reviews street design on just kind of ongoing maintenance needs, but also all of the capital improvements. They do the impact analysis review. They set the design standards. And as a new item in the last 9 months or so, we've now got standing meetings with our police departments, which they're coordinating different efforts around enforcement, also getting input from the police department around what they're seeing that might not otherwise be collected in data that we get from speeds or crash reports that are frequently provided months later, but gives us an opportunity to get some anecdotal review from them. Our Vision Zero team has 8 FTEs. Our police department is more than 200. A lot more eyes that we're able to get data from through them. But it is one. So just a couple of things that we're doing. Actually, you can skip these. So Assembly Bill 43 allows us to change speed limits. We've gone through systemically to over 200 street segments in our streets. Made a series of more than 40 reductions in the last in August that were implemented. We've got another series of 50 that are coming to council next month. Again, it's kind of starting that cycle. We're allowed to reduce the speed limit. We see speeds that are still high, and we make design changes to enforce those speeds. And look again and see if we should reduce speeds further. What we're seeing is that we are lowering speeds. We're getting enough people to drop speeds, especially on 2-lane roads, that they're enforcing the behavior for others. Some of those higher end speeds we're still seeing, but we're seeing less frequently. So it's encouraging that speed limits alone, without any design treatments, are still decreased speeds. Here's an example in our downtown of a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit sign. We also have the new bill around daylighting and being able to enforce that no parking within 20 feet of marked and unmarked crosswalks. We go to the next one. We had a series of project examples that we used as templates from around the country. That was the basis of our Safe Streets and Roads for All application last year. Had to be a little creative and combine with other entities within the county, submit an application through Sonoma County Transportation Authority. But that was successful. And as a set of locations that we, rather than sketch out every individual project, we submitted this map as our locations for where we would implement these projects. Got funding to do more than 500 intersections, all small scale temporary materials with our city crews. But we're just going to go with that template to these locations, draw it out, engage the community as necessary, and where some of those areas that have interested parties, let them help us lay out those intersections. This will all be done once SCTA is able to figure out the procurements. Street crews will have those materials. We've also priced in labor to our grant application too, so that can be implemented. With that, I appreciate again the opportunity to be here, and thanks for the time.
Thanks everyone for joining. I know that we're a little over time, but if you have a burning question, 1 or 2 questions, feel free. We're probably taking some notes. So feel free to put out if you need to. But go ahead.
Talking about transit-oriented development, which is supposed to increase pedestrian activity. You see a conflict with that, reducing speed or having street design bicycle.
Only if we didn't improve the street design to respond to the changing needs and behaviors of that street, then yes, I think if we were creating development that exposes people to dangerous conditions, then yeah, that development gives us both an opportunity to review through the development review process and make improvements immediately adjacent and surrounding the site, but also further encourages us to do so by creating more opportunities. It does also give people the opportunity to take the safest mode of transportation, which is public transit.
So you had a slide up there where you've got language paper article. You share what language would be. Do you have an example of that?
Not from the slide, but I think just active language.
Yeah.
That says, the subject in all of those sentences was the woman struck. And I understand wanting to center that person, but the action was not hers getting killed, right? It was the actions of a driver operating a vehicle that killed a woman. And I think centering that shows the activity that created the headline, right? That's why I had.
Yeah, I'm curious about, since one of the things I was identified was creating a safety culture within the environment, and I know like one of the big things you mentioned was about police, and I'm curious about how taking steps to implement and teach city staff about safety culture?
Yeah, so we started within our department and kind of working through division by division to see what are you doing that has an impact on transportation safety that you're not considering right. So that was how we highlighted those 6 divisions. And I'm happy to take any suggestions from anybody else about anything that I didn't talk about and missed because it's a work in progress. We also made this a highlight of both we're required to get city council approval to submit our Safe Streets and Roads for All application. So I made a big hubbub instead of just submitting an item for consent. I did a presentation to kind of highlight some of this. And then through the capital improvement program prioritization process, highlighting what that's done. So it's sharing with our city manager, our other departments heads, and our elected officials about how that's happening too. So work to do still with other city departments, but they're seeing what our priorities are pretty clearly.
Yeah.
Can I do a couple rapid fire? Oh, go ahead.
Because I know police departments is speed limit isn't limit, it's limit plus 10.
Yeah, the meetings that we're having are helping to create. I don't want to pretend like we're telling the police department what to do, but we have an avenue now for a dialogue with them that I think is helping to educate them about the impacts of not enforcing the speed limit or how they're enforcing the speed limit and what that means for fatal and severe crashes.
Dan, can I do a couple rapid fire? What are TPW operations?
Our transportation public works operations.
Okay.
It's our day-to-day maintenance facilities, kind of keeping the city running, responding to our version of 311 requests, things like that.
Are you narrowing lanes?
Oh, yeah.
What's your typical, what do you do for that?
We've got our standard down from 12 to 11. We've got our turn lanes down from 11 to 10. I'm working on getting a set of recommendations that tie the lane widths to our target speeds and getting the default down to 10 and kind of making, if you need 11, you got to prove it rather than the other way around.
What about for transit? Do you have to
Yeah,
expand?
that's really the exception of why 11 and sometimes 11 and a half is necessary.
And then are you guys tracking incidents and collisions involving unhoused individuals as separately identified vulnerable road user group? How do you kind of get that information?
From police department, they, in completing their police reports, they track down information about the individual, and through that process, we're finding out that those folks are unhoused.
And then last one is, do you try to align the bus schedules with the work schedules or library schedules or event schedules that are going on in the area around the transit?
One of the more frustrating things about our transit system right now, that our revenue is taking a huge hit. Most of our routes are 30 or 60 minutes. So it's really frustrating to try to align schedules to anything. We make tweaks frequently, which I think frustrates riders, but we changed everything through COVID to respond to that and are kind of bringing it back to service. Our ridership is close to pre-COVID. We're almost 90%. Big part of that, though, is that we made bus free for everybody under 18. And so our ridership demographics are now totally different. So we're reimagining a system to respond to that new group of riders.
Okay. Sorry, just look at it.
Thanks for managing
Yeah.
that too.